A lot of people always have questions about what's your inspiration for what you do. And really there's two kinds of inspiration that I've only encountered. Maybe there's more, but this is what I've encountered. And I also want to tell a story about how that inspiration has inspired a body of work of mine that's gone on now for almost 10 years. Okay, here's what it is, and I get this question, I don't know, at least once every time I have a show, and it's not very often in between. And the question kind of comes down to what inspires you. And you know, there's a million answers to that question. You can get really granular and specific. I tend to stay a little more general with it. And what I tend to say is this. Inspiration that I get as an abstract painter comes two ways. For the most part, the most important one is what I like to call the big boom. And the big boom is that you have this idea, you have this piece you do, or this idea that you do, and what that idea gives you is this huge explosion with a million paintings, 1,000, 2,000 artworks that come from it. And it's that core idea that kind of drives everything. Now there's smaller inspirations, I call these like little booms. And they're like, oh, you know what, this would be nice, like with a blue one, I can counteract that. That's really more process to me. But I also feel that kind of inspiration comes a lot with people who paint kind of more traditionally. Maybe they do figures, maybe they do landscapes. They already know they're kind of gonna do a landscape. That's not a problem, let's say. What they need to do is they need to be kind of inspired by the place they see or the thing that they want to do. And that kind of is what I call small boom, because what it's really good for is a few paintings maybe, and a number of sketches and drawings. Whereas the bigger boom, like I say, really generates like an entire body of work for multiple years. I've been fortunate enough to have a few of those, and managing them is always kind of a trick, but it's not so bad. So let's kind of break down what the hell I'm trying to talk about here and see where it goes. No one walks around and like as you're just walking down the street, the light bulb goes off. Although it does happen, what tends to happen is you've got something on your mind or it's sitting in the back of your mind and you see something and it triggers an association and the light bulb goes off. Now maybe you're walking down the street but you see all the work you did in front of it, it just doesn't hit you cold. So in my case, in 2015, I'd been painting in this one style for a little over 10 years. It was with grids, it was a heavy paint, I was using concrete scrapers to make it. It was somewhat successful and I was enjoying making them, but I was also kind of running into what I saw was like the end of the road. And I saw it coming a little bit ahead of time. And so I started thinking like, what am I interested in, what am I not interested in? And usually I kind of take off from doing as much as possible. Between Christmas and New Year's, I kind of view myself as a Christian, though I don't really practice or anything. So, you know, Christmas to New Year's is a great time to take off. You've got kind of parties and stuff. You clean up your studio, or you make like little small things. I decided, you know what, let's make a little small painting. We'll just see what happens. And I started making these very small paintings on museum board. And I used museum board only because it was around. You know, I had scraps of it from doing like a framing thing or something. And I enjoyed painting on the museum board, but I really enjoyed what these little pieces came from, and they ended up becoming a project for me, which I called a year in painting. And a year in painting was basically doing a painting every day. I posted it online, and it just kept going at the end of the year. So I started January 1 officially, and then finished up December 31st of that year. And something that was amazing about that to me is I didn't ever run out of ideas with that. These little daily paintings, in fact, they started in 2015. They continue today. I may not do them every single day, but I probably do them a few days a week. And they still go on. And they actually now drive ideas on bigger paintings. They help drive ideas on where things go. And in fact, those painting a day paintings are directly related to my new circle paintings. Really what I view them as is just a way to connect everything together as a whole. It's a real simple kind of distinction, but it's not like I'm in love with circles per se. So if you know what I mean by that. So I want to talk about this painting a day program and how the inspiration of that has driven me to a large body of work. So like I said, 2015, I had this idea to do a painting a day, and I didn't really think I was going to do a painting a day until I don't know, December 30th. You know, it was just like I'd done this thing, I'd done a couple of them, these little small pieces on museum board. And it turned out I kept looking at them, and they were everything I'd been trying to avoid for years. You know, I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area. I went to school at Virginia Commonwealth University, graduated at the Corcoran Museum School, and we saw a lot of color field work, and a whole lot of color field work. And I thought to myself, I just don't want to go down that path. You know, this is what I was taught. This is what my instructors were doing. Why do I really have to kind of focus on that route? There's other things to do. Top this all off, it was the early 1980s, so that whole kind of neo-expressionist figurative painting was very, very much in vogue. You know, I dabbled with that for a few years and realized it kind of wasn't for me, although the work I thought was okay. And it took a while for me to actually get to where I wanted to go, but I realized what I was going to work with were these grids and these thick paintings, and then these started to stop. Yeah, and that's fine, because any inspiration, any kind of approach you make to art is going to have a start and a stop date, right? It's just the way things go. So that stop date had been like 12 years. So I did about 12 years of grid paintings, and I was ready to move on. And so I did. And I moved on to these small daily paintings. I then built them up into larger paper pieces, and eventually become paintings. I've done paintings in this size, as large as 80 by 80. And as small as, I guess, 36 by 36. I don't do much painting smaller than that. And that's where that led me. But what that process led me towards was a way of understanding where your work comes from. So what led me to this was this idea that I've suddenly had a better instinct on creation and inspiration. And I read this line a number of years ago from Calvin Johnson of K Records. For what it's worth, I have kind of a history of my life inside of punk indie rock, and that's kind of the music I listen to. But there's a conversation that kind of got out. He was talking to Rose Melberg. Rose Melberg is a singer at the time in Tiger Trap and later of the Softies. And he would say, Rose, your creativity isn't a pond, it's a river. It just keeps flowing. And I thought about that, and at the time I kind of like skimmed right over it and like went on to something else. But it's a really good analogy for creativity and inspiration. Your creativity and your inspiration is a river, it's not a pond. Ponds can empty out. Rivers keep flowing, and you just pick them up in other places. And that really has carried me for a number of years, and I think that it's important to understand your inspiration and your process that way. So like I said, this little painting a day project that I started, I did it in 1 year. I put out a book for it. I'll put a link if you want to buy the book, and the images from that are all over my website, MatthewLangley.com. I'll put a link to that too. And, you know, I did a Kickstarter to do the book, and that was great, and the book has been really strong for me. But what this 1 year project really did for me, it made me understand how everything kind of works as a whole, and the inspiration you pull from that really becomes part of just your daily practice and how you live your life. And that's the part of inspiration that I think is really important. Whether you're a kind of more traditional painter doing figurative work or landscape work or still lifes, if people even still do still lifes, or if you're an abstract painter and you're kind of working in a far more nebulous area where you're not really making images but you're making paintings, if that makes any sense. The idea of inspiration kind of comes in a lot of different forms. It comes both in really big, kind of oversized grand ideas, and then it comes in very small, very specific ideas. So when someone asks you, what's inspiring you? You have a number of ways to answer that question. And I know, because I get kind of hung up on it, I'm sure a lot of other artists get hung up on it. And the last thing you kind of want to be is one of those artists that goes, well, let me tell you about my particular brand of genius, and then you kind of spout off for a while. That's maybe what this entire video channel is about. And I apologize for calling it a channel. But that's the thing. And that's the whole thing about inspiration and how we work in the studio, is we come up with these big ideas and then we do the work for these big ideas. Some people's big idea might only drive 5 pieces of art and maybe a handful of drawings. That's fine. Then you need another idea. Or maybe you need a bigger idea. It was interesting, when I first moved to New York, I was talking to a fellow artist, and I was really fortunate. I had a show in Chelsea fairly quickly. Within the first 5 months of my moving to New York, I'd had a show in Chelsea, and I really thought that that would maybe be 4 or 5 years out, if ever. Okay. And we were doing a studio visit. He was talking to me. I was talking to him. He's like, and I told him my thing. And he's like, you might need a bigger dream. And I was like, and no truer words were ever spoken. And in my head, I thank that artist all the time for that. And maybe that's some words that will help you in your day today as well. Thank you for your time today. Kind of a quick one in the end of summer. Hope fall is looking good for everybody. Here in New York, of course, fall starts with a flurry of really enormous, great openings and art installations coming our way. Maybe I'll try to get something covered in that in the next week or two. Anyhow, thanks again. I hope you listened and hope you got something out of this. Like and subscribe if you can. I hate asking every video, but I seem like I have to. And I'll talk to you real soon. Thanks.